All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Today's free educational webinar is about getting the most out of your HOMER results. So in this webinar, we're going to go through the different results options that HOMER offers, and you'll be able to understand how to properly interpret and understand those results. Also, I'll point out the new features that we've added. We've just released a version of HOMER Pro, and several of the features that are new there will be pointed out today. So I am Steffi Clowder. I'm the product manager at HOMER Energy. I'll be presenting for the main part today, and we're joined with Arvi, who is online to answer your questions at any time. So for those of you new to HOMER Energy, the main purpose of our products is to find you the lowest cost solution. And we have a simulation engine that runs for a full year, hour by hour, or down to a minute by minute time step. And we're trying to find the best mix of resources that will reliably balance the energy supply and the demand. And we've spun out of NREL, that was 10 years ago, so we've leveraged over a decade of expertise in designing distributed generation systems. We do have two different products for the different applications. HOMER Pro is our flagship product, and HOMER Grid is a bit newer. So HOMER Pro is for microgrids of all shapes and sizes, from the rural electrification application to grid extension, island microgrids, and island utilities. It also does grid-connected modeling, but HOMER Grid is really the tool for grid-connected distributed generation systems, especially for systems where you're trying to reduce your demand charges, especially targeted for kind of solar scale, stable grids, where you're trying to stack the values of different incentives, demand charge reduction, energy arbitrage, and self-consumption. So HOMER is an acronym. Just to give a bit of background for those of you who don't know us, it stands for Hybrid Optimization of Multiple Energy Resources. And what the two products do is, for a full year, they run every single time step, and there are different dispatch strategies that determine how the system should operate. So you want to get a system that is realistic to what you could implement in the field. So we're trying to get a general economic sense of what systems are going to be feasible. And we do that by running 1 year of the simulation. We also have multi-year as a feature, but that's something we can talk about later. Then we can categorize these simulations by the lowest net present cost to find which system is the winning system and which system architecture is going to have the lowest net present cost over its lifetime. To do risk analysis, we have a sensitivity analysis feature so that for kind of risky variables that you're not sure how they will change in the future, you could assign multiple values, and you can see how a higher diesel price will affect the system architecture, and contrast that with what would the system architecture be with a lower diesel price. So you can understand which variables should be possibly researched more, or if you need better wind data, the sensitivity analysis can help you understand that concept. So at a very high level, what you'll need to use the HOMER products are, you'll do some inputs, you'll run the system, and you'll do the outputs. And today is all about the outputs, actually. I feel like most of our webinars focus on the input side, and so that's why we're balancing it out today and really looking at what can you get out of your results. But for this project inputs, you'll need to give a load profile for the full year. And we have easy ways for you to do that. We have a couple different databases that we're using so that you can quickly find an appropriate load profile if you don't have the interval data available. And we have some synthetic profiles where you can add variability. We'll need to know your location, and we have a couple of different databases about solar resources, so you can quickly pull those based on your location. Of course, you can upload your own resource if you have that. And then finally, you'll need to specify which components are you considering and what are the costs of those components. And with that information, HOMER runs its different simulations, including sensitivity analyses. And this works for both Pro and Grid. And it comes up with the engineering and economics of the system, including or especially the system sizing, how that system is performing, what's the battery doing, what's the state of charge, how is it cycling, and the financials for this system. So you can understand which technologies and which sizing are economically feasible. And now we will jump into looking at a couple different results. So first, as I get started, I'd like to go over a couple different HOMER terms that we use often here. The base case system. So today we'll be looking at both Pro and Grid, so we'll be jumping back and forth between the two of them. But these terms apply to both softwares. So right here I have HOMER Pro, and right here I have HOMER Grid. In HOMER Grid, for the grid connected system, most often your base case system is going to be the utility only system unless you have existing solar, for example, installed already. By default, HOMER assigns a base case system, which you can of course change if we've chosen it incorrectly, but we choose it based on the lowest capital cost. So any system that you're going to consider building has to demonstrate its economics compared to the base case system. So if you're thinking about approaching a customer about installing PV, you'll need to demonstrate that that's going to save money over just sticking with the utility. So that's the importance of the base case, and by defining the base case, we can calculate all the important economic metrics like IRR and payback time, so that you can present those to your clients as well. So that's base case definition. And on the other hand, we have the winning system, which is what we define as the lowest net present cost system. So HOMER optimizes on net present cost. If other variables are important to you, you can of course go find the system with the highest IRR, with the lowest payback time, and we'll go through how to sort and filter through different simulation results for that. And finally, some sensitivity analyses we've mentioned before. Those are when you define, for example, multiple diesel fuel prices or multiple wind values here. So with these, we're trying to understand the risk of a higher or lower fuel price, or the risk of higher than expected or lower than expected wind resource. So with sensitivity analyses, based on different input variables, the results may change, and that's what the sensitivity variables are useful for. All right, so in both of our products, the first thing you'll see when you get to the results view after you calculate is the summary page. And the summary tab is a new feature in HOMER Pro. So if you haven't seen this before in your HOMER Pro software, you can download the latest version at HOMER Energy Pro. I had it on the intro slide. And that will have the summary tab, as well as some major improvements to the time series viewer. So in the summary tab, what we're seeing is the base case architecture, which in this example is a 2-generator system. And that's this gray line here, represented by the base case. So for these 2-generator systems, they're already installed. There's no initial capital expenditure, and you're just paying year over year for the project lifetime. On the other hand, we have the system winning architecture, the winning system architecture, which includes the generators, but also includes wind. And the economics of that show initial capital cost and a lower year-over-year cost, kind of shallower slope there. So as you can see, when these lines cross, that's actually when the payback time is. So we've chosen to focus on this because this graphic shows so much of the important economics, like the payback time, like the initial capital cost of your winning system, and really the overall savings by the end of the project lifetime. So this is a very simple chart that packs a lot of information in it. And additional information about the initial capital and operating cost and cost of energy we can see over on the right-hand side here. So this is the screen that you'll see when the winning system architecture is something other than your base case system. So when the hybrid system wins, we'll be able to see some kind of payback time. If you're only running one system, or if it's actually best for you to stick with your generators, that would probably take place under a low fuel price and a poor wind resource. In this case, the generator is the winning system, the lowest net present cost system, and we've shown the cash flow over the project lifetime for just this base case system. So we have some additional help resources here if this result is not what you expect to see. If it is what you expect to see, that's great. But some people are confused why the base case system wins, why those economics of the two generators could be better than the hybrid system. And in this case, it's because there's a low fuel price and a poor wind resource. So one other thing to mention is the third screen that you could possibly see here is if you get no feasible results for a system. And if you do, in HOMER Grid, it's relatively straightforward because you're generally connected to the utility, so you should always get some kind of results. If in HOMER Pro you get infeasible results, I'd recommend adding an auto-sized generator, checking what kind of renewable fraction constraints you've set. There's several different ways that we could end up with infeasible solutions, which basically means that the generation sources that you've defined with the constraints are not meeting your load. So if you're getting that and you're frustrated, we have help resources. Of course, we're willing to help you through that. All right, so the view that you're probably more comfortable with for the HOMER results are these table views. That was the classical view as you came to the results. And depending on your system, if you've included sensitivities in your model, you'll see this upper table, which shows the sensitivity cases. If you don't have any sensitivities in your model, you'll just see this lower table, which is the optimization results. So the way that the top table works is that if you click on the high fuel price and high wind resource here, this system showing up is the top line of this lower table here. And this lower table is sorted by net present cost. So this is our winning system under the case of a good wind resource and kind of middle of the road diesel fuel price. By clicking on the different sensitivity analyses here, you'll be able to see more options under these optimization results. So you'll notice the lower table changes based on clicking on the upper table. One more thing that I'd like to point out here is it looks like you could interpret this as HOMER's only calculated 2 systems for this sensitivity analysis. But actually, HOMER's calculated much more than that. And to see all of the results, you would go to this overall radio button here. And that allows you to see every kind of system architecture sizing combination that HOMER has tested. So you can see really the robust modeling capabilities of HOMER in that it calculates hundreds to thousands of systems all within one model run. So just for this one sensitivity case, we have not quite 100 cases here that we've modeled. And each of them, they could vary by the different system sizing or the dispatch chosen, and you could tweeze through these results. If you had a different metric, which is more important to you than net present cost, you could sort by the IRRs or what's going to reduce your fuel cost the most, anything like that. So using these little sort and filters here, you can find the system that you really want to do a deep dive into and investigate. And one last thing before we do that deep dive into the simulation results are our graphical results. Especially in HOMER Pro, we like to look at the OST charts, and we could see, as we were talking about, at a better wind resource, we're going to include a system with wind, and at a poorer wind resource, we're going to include a system without wind. And you can see where that point is. But it's not, all the variables do have an impact on each other, and this OST chart allows you to get some insight into how differing fuel prices in combination with the wind price can affect the system architecture type. So we have several more graphical results here to help you analyze how the sensitivity variables may impact the winning system results. And for any of these graphics, I think it's worth mentioning, you can export the image as a PNG, and you could include that in any kind of report that you're trying to build up. These are not included in the simulation reports that we'll go over in a minute, because the simulation report is just about one system, and the OST chart really gives you a high-level understanding of all the systems, all of the winning systems that we've calculated. All right, so doing our deep dive into one single result here. So we're looking at, we'll do just middle of the road, diesel and wind. And we'll do double click into a line and you'll get the simulation results. So the first thing you'll see are the cost summary broken down by component. And you can see a different graphic based on cost type or component. We can see the cash flow over the whole project lifetime. You can see when the replacement cost is happening and what is being replaced, the wind turbine. In addition to the summary page, we have additional charts for comparing the economics of the system. And we're comparing that base case of the generators versus the wind. There's also electrical, which shows how the demand is being served by the generation sources. And there's always an emissions tab as well. Then these other tabs will change depending on the system that you've modeled. So in this system we're looking at, there's 2 generators and there's a wind turbine. So each tab is a different component generally, and then there's some summary tabs like fuel summary or renewable penetration, which give you an insight into the total fuel consumption from these 2 generators. So this is all for this one system and these under these sensitivity analyses here. We wanted to look more deeply into what is this system doing time step by time step. These DMAPs are very helpful to understand that. Also, our time series plot is very helpful to understand that. And we do have some great improvements here. So this is a new feature in HOMER Pro where we have these presets here, and you can see what is serving the load. And you can customize these graphs and make your own presets, and very interested to hear feedback from you all about what your favorite graph is to look at. This is useful because you can set these graphs up, and then you can easily come back to them in different files or in different simulations instead of having to rebuild them up. And it will save the color, the different technology types, and really make things very slick for you, including as you're trying to make a report. You can quickly choose from the drop-down of the plot that you've made and add that to your report. So here is the system operating over the whole year. And the navy blue is the total load served, and the oranges are the generator outputs, and the purple is the wind turbine. So you can see how when the wind is operating, maybe you don't need generators to be operating. So when wind is high, you can put the one generator down at minimum load and turn one generator off completely. So in this way, you can really dig deep into the details of the system and understand that the dispatch is operating correctly. You trust that this is going to give a good representation of the economic results, everything like that. Some things that, so if you wanted to add different components or change the colors, you could do that here. Something more obvious. And that will be updated in this legend here above. So any kind of editing that you'll need to do is under this lower section. And then you can save the graph and save the changes that you made. Some little features which you may want to look at especially are when you're doing a time series multi-year run, you can actually look at the different years within the time series viewer and see how each year operates. Similarly, you can look at a year with a large resilience event in HOMER Grid and without a large resilience event in HOMER Grid. And those will come as drop-downs in the upper right-hand corner. Other than the time series viewer here, which is really the star of the show, there are additional ways to view this data, and those are tabs up at the top here. So just quickly, we have a box and whiskers plot here, which shows the average monthly value, and we're looking at wind speed here. We could look at any variable of our choosing. We could look at what's the load doing, and see the average load for January is 250. So the box and whiskers chart can be very helpful. This profile shows a month-by-month profile of the variable of your choosing. So you can see, interestingly, in January, our load is much higher than in fall. So our fall to winter months are a bit lower. We have probably some significant heating load in January and February. The DMAPs that you can find in a lot of the tabs within the simulation results are also available within the time series viewer. And you can choose, for example, the state of charge to see what that's doing. So I encourage you to check out the various different tabs here, the histogram, the cumulative distribution function, and the duration curve. There is a ton of information here, and we don't have time to go into it all today, but I'll look forward to any specific questions you have about these features as well. So the main next section we'll get to is talking about reporting in HOMER. And the simulation report is going to create a report of all the information that we can kind of see within these results here about this one simulation at this one sensitivity variable with the diesel fuel price and the wind speed. So here's where you can customize your reports, and you can add the different time series, as I mentioned. You can include it and add that power sources chart, and that way in your report you'll be able to get that printed out in PDF or docx, HTML. You can add your custom company logo to it. You can rearrange the order or which sections are shown within the report. And we'll give you a quick preview of that. And that's to help you when you're trying to present this to a potential client or to your colleagues, really taking this system to the next step is where this will be useful. So these are notes on the file which were defined in the design view. And of course, the sections will depend on what your system is. So just scroll through to give you an idea. I will mention that there is an additional reporting capability within HOMER Grid, which is the optimization report, and that will give a report in HTML format on these top systems here. So that's an additional resource in addition to the simulation report, which shows the results from one single simulation. All right, I think that we've covered most of the main aspects of the results features. I would like to mention that if you're interested in training or if you're struggling with getting useful information out, we are happy to help you. We have different premium support options and consulting where we can train you or do a one-on-one with you, and we're happy to do that. And then we'll get to questions. So RB, feel free to jump in because I haven't had a chance to look at which questions have been coming through. Let me just sort through, give me a minute here.
Yeah, so Steffi, one of the questions was that what is the difference between HOMER Pro and HOMER Grid?
Oh, that's a great question. So yeah, today we kind of glossed over the differences because we were focusing on the similarities between the two of them. But really it's about the applications. So what makes them different is the dispatch. HOMER Grid's dispatch strategy is specifically for reducing your demand charges. And I have what's a really great way to show that is through this time series plot, actually. So in HOMER Grid, what's special is that the dispatch goes through and month by month it tries to find what's the most economic balance between buying nothing from the grid or buying everything from the grid. And based on how expensive your distributed generation resources are, how do those compare to the grid price? So what's the best balance between those two extremes? So this dispatch is just available in HOMER Grid, and something that you can use to understand HOMER Grid's dispatch, since it is quite complex, is the dispatch log here. So we're giving you insight into what the dispatch is doing time step by time step, so you can understand that the dispatch is operating in an economic way that's representative of what you'd expect. So that's one main difference between the two products. Also, HOMER Grid's utility component is very complex. So you can set all kinds of different tariffs, like ratchet rates, contracted demand, all the things that come with being attached to a very complicated utility. HOMER Grid covers. HOMER Pro does have some grid-connected modeling capabilities, but they are much more limited in the tariff structure that you can build up. On the other hand, HOMER Pro has a wider range of technologies that it considers. So if you're modeling hydrogen, and if you're modeling off-grid systems, that's really where HOMER Pro excels. So they're different tools for different applications, and we will continue to develop both of them for their different applications.
So based on that question, can you install both Homer Pro and Homer Grid on the same desktop? And do both products have multi-year?
Good question. Yes, both products have multi-year, and both can be installed on the same desktop, as you can kind of see online. So I can use Homer Pro for my off-grid systems and Homer Grid for my grid-connected systems. And it is a little bit more complex than just grid versus on versus off-grid, perhaps. If your Homer Pro is great for considering grid extension. So if you're considering the economic decision of extending your grid to your facility or just having a microgrid standalone, Homer Grid or Homer Pro is good at that.
Thanks, Steffi. So another question that we have over here is, can we compare the base system and the hybrid system based on CO2 emissions?
Let's see. So how we could do that is look at Homer Pro here. If you are looking for different column choices here, look at here. System CO2. Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to do it. Of course, we could click into a specific result, or if we wanted to see our emissions in this tabular view, we could just add that column to what we're viewing. So now we can look at with wind turbine, we're reducing our CO2. Or the emissions tab, which we didn't look at explicitly, will tell you that as well.
So another question is, do you prefer to use the Homer optimizer or search space while deciding the size of the component? And can you enter the range for the optimizer?
Yeah, that is another fabulous question. So in case you're not familiar with Homer, there is an optimizer or there is a search space. And it's more straightforward for PV. So for PV, we can optimize what's the most economic size going to be, or we can say, I will only consider a 500 kilowatt system. If you are using the optimizer, there are ways to set an upper and lower bound. So we could say, I wouldn't consider anything for my PV system, which is twice the peak load. So we could set an upper bound there. So we're back to the question of which to use. They're both great for different kind of stages of your project or different situations. So the Homer optimizer is a great way to get started quickly and quickly understand what the best sizing is going to be. Then you'll need to iterate on that. Based on that information, you can say, I wouldn't actually consider a converter of 32.8 because I can only buy a converter of 32 kilowatts. So that's a great place to use the search space, is to specifically say, my component can only come in increments of, I don't know, 8 kilowatts. So that is when to use the search space, is when you're on at the kind of more mature modeling end in the late stage. But the HOMER optimizer is a very powerful tool. That is a great way to get started quickly.
Thanks, Steffi. So one question that we had is, what are the different types of storage models we provide in Homer Pro, and how do we select them?
Yes, great question. I'll take that in Homer Grid because we have a battery in this model. So the battery is a very complicated aspect of a system. What we've done in Homer is that we have various different battery models which can represent different chemistries, and you can customize that in the library. The library views are a little bit different in each of the products, but we can understand at a high level that there's several different battery models. There's idealized, kinetic, advanced storage. And what that means is there's different inputs which determine the performance characteristics of the battery. So for this ASM model that I'm looking at, I can define how is the end of life calculated, how does the capacity available depend on the discharge power, how does the relative capacity depend on temperature, how does cycling do to its lifetime. All these variables are part of the ASM battery model, and they're taken into account when we use this model in our system. So the ASM is the most complex. The idealized is a bit simpler, and our kinetic is great for lead acid. So under the library's list view, you can see the different models here. Idealized, ASM, kinetic. There's also flywheel, especially in HOMER Pro. And as I mentioned, kinetic's great for lead acid. Idealized is great for lithium ion. ASM is the most complex and realistic model because it takes into account all the different degradations that batteries in the real world may be facing.
Thank you, Steffi.
Yeah, I guess one more resource that I should mention is our help documentation, which can explain this more completely. We have online help for both products, and if you're modeling offline, there's also a help documentation available within the product. But within HOMER Energy, HOMERenergy.com, you can find the help manuals for both of the different products.
So I guess one last question is, where can we find a recording of this webinar?
Oh, good question. I didn't address that. Yes, we always record the webinar and we post it to our YouTube channel in about a week. Is how long we generally say it's going to take. But all of the past recordings from the webinars are also found on the YouTube channel. So that's another great resource, along with the help documentation. And the knowledge base is also a great resource. And these can all be found on our website. Knowledge base training, community support, and the community forum. So these are great resources for you to get started, or if you got stuck, to get unstuck. How to download the latest version. You can go to our website and Products Pro download. All right, I think we got most of the questions, RB? If we haven't addressed your question, don't be offended. Please write to our support team at support@homerenergy.com. So thank you for your time, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar, which will be in June, and we'll be focused on a new feature in HOMER Grid about demand response. So thanks for your time, and we look forward to you next time.